Hi friends, Russell West. As we turn our attention to the role of supervisors and the role of teams inside of systems, I want to talk about power. As we are considering how leaders participate and shape community, what they can do to make a difference inside of communities, power becomes an important part of the discussion. What can you get done? How do you get it done when power must be mediated through lines and transformed to get the charge right-sized? How do you do it? I'm going to upload a document and associate it with our conversation here, and it's called West's Leadership Axioms. Now, this is another complimentary. You do not have to read this, but let me tell you why I'm offering you a copy of it. You see, over the years, as I've tried to make sense of the organizational intelligence field of organizational development, design, transformation, those sorts of arts, social psychology, communication, this field is so interdisciplinary, it's a lot to keep up with. But I agree with Kurt Lewin that there are few things as practical as a good theory. When you've got a puzzle on your hands, a phenomena on your hands, but you can isolate some data points that you suspect might enlighten you if you could just get a question asked or just get some feedback or some data to confirm a hunch that you have. Well, in that document, there's all kinds of crazy little aphorisms I've come up with to become mental hooks for me to talk about theory, practice, and insights that I've gleaned over the years and have become ways of thinking about certain challenges over the years. But there's one of these axioms that becomes relevant for our conversation. It's the one at the top. I call it my overarching one, and it's this: you will never lead more than a team. You will never lead more than a team. Therefore, make the spiritual mastery of social laws the secret of your leadership charm. I'll give the whole thing to you again. You will never lead more than a team comprised of a cadre of people very much like yourself, people that you could relate to, empathize with, serve, connect with. You'll never lead more than a team. You can know all of their birthdays. You could know their kids' names. You'll never lead more than a small team. Whether you're a president or lead the Navy or a Girl Scout troop or the youth department, you will never lead more than a team. Therefore, make the spiritual mastery of social laws the secret of your leadership charm. Okay, Russ, you promised us a discussion about power. How is this all connected? Well, if you would consider my axiom, again, this is an organizing a mental model for me. It doesn't have to work for you, but it allows me to hook a lot of things together as it pertains to this topic. So if you can get where I'm going at least and get my assumptions, then there's two things that would be provoked in you about that axiom. The first one is this: West alludes to something called spiritual mastery of social laws, and I haven't heard that word before. I don't know what he's talking about. And if he's not just kind of popping off, coming up with some creative to have an excuse to talk about something he wants to talk about, then maybe he has an insight into something and I don't know about it. It's possible to turn a corner one day and come to realize that there's a whole street in the neighborhood that you've lived in that you've never had need go down. And what I hope the first part of the axiom provokes for you would be a recognition that something might exist out of there that you do not yet have situational awareness for and about, but that you might make room for its existence. You might become open to curiosity around this possibility. So I think that's kind of the first provocation that's inside of the axiom. The second one is the good news, and it's this: behold your teachers. If you have team, if you have one other person, then at that point you now have team. You're not alone anymore. Two can pull the cart together if yoked well, right? But if you've got team, and I like my Mickey Mouse definition of team says it's that group of people where your weaknesses are neutralized and your strengths complement and you achieve performance results together, maintaining an identity that interests you in a future with one another. It's about performance. It's about a shared identity. It's about winning together. It's about complementing one another, and it's about neutralizing those things which would create drift and drag. Behold your teachers. Here's the good news. If you are in community, if you have even created a triangle of just a few people through which you are interested in mediating a new order of things, which is what leaders tend to do, then behold your teachers on how you're going to get there. If you have team, you have the teachers to activate all the axioms that you have to reckon with and make clear of, so that when you walk through the world theory building as to why things are, or why did that surprise take me off my feet? How come I didn't see that one coming when I thought I was paying attention? When those moments come, they become moments for us to pause and to reassess assumptions we have made, and then to practice a kind of versatility that says, although I am whole, although these assumptions have gotten me this far, I now revise and grow. And what I'm suggesting to you with this axiom, my chief organizing axiom is that you'll never lead more than a team, a cadre of people who are very much like yourself. Therefore, make the spiritual mastery of social laws the secret of your leadership charm. The reason I call this second part the good news is leadership is a gift that a community bestows upon people in order to achieve their aims. Did you hear that? Leadership is a gift of legitimacy, authority, titles, corner office sometime, a cool hat. But it's the gift that a community bestows upon itself to achieve its mission, its purposes. Friends, if you've got a set of keys in your pocket, or if you've got a wallet or a purse and it has any kinds of cards in it that have your identity markers on it, then you're credible with some people. You're trusted by some people. That's what that means. You would not have keys nor cards unless you had gone through some qualifying process, some certifying process where people can say legit. And if you have a title inside of an organization, even if it's called supervisor, then you're somewhere. You're already somewhere, and for the confidence questions, the credibility questions, the competence questions, and the command questions that tend to go with leadership development, your team is enough. However, if you, at this time, find that your team is a source of difficulty, that you wouldn't trust them as far as you could throw them in terms of delegation, so you'd rather do it yourself in a pinch. If you are stunting your team by dumping on them, and you call that delegation, and not developing them, and shifting your work so that you are supervising excellence or the standards or the accuracy or the quality, mediating the standards and the cultural values and the mission into a group of people. If you haven't figured out that that would be a supervisor's role, to supervise, to look down over, to bishop, that's the word, episcopal, right? To look over, to oversee. If you've not yet gotten clear about the identity work that a person must do to say, my best work will only be achieved if I can mediate it through others. And if I'm still here making the copies, someone else is not doing the strategic planning, or at least being stretched and grown to come to realize what they're going to need to do and learn to do the strategic planning. So once upon a time, there was a group of folks who were gathered around. It was in the fellowship hall, and a ruckus had sort of begun, and lots of yelling and screaming, voices raised, and then there was a knock on the door that kind of broke the silence. That broke the silence of what was happening in the other room. The door came out. Curly-haired fellow, dark hair, looks out the door and says, "Yes, how can we help you?" And the guy whispers in Hebrew that the Hellenistic Jews have been overlooked again in the distribution of food, and they're really upset about it. What should we do? Peter, who we know, was always in a process of sanctifying his tongue. He's the only member of the Trinity that has been interrupted. He's the only person who's been interrupted by every member of the Trinity at some point with a bright idea that he's had. By this time is filled. He's in a prayer meeting. They're studying the Word. These folks have figured out that unless we do the supervisory work, the looking down over work, there's other work that won't get done. So, tempering his tongue this time, so he doesn't wind up being told that I hear the voice of Satan coming out of you. Tempering his tongue this time, he says, if we go out there and serve chicken chow mein, that leaves you guys unemployed. So, don't you have among you a few people who are also filled, who have some wisdom, who are in good reputation? You think you can find a few other folks who are sitting around spiritually unemployed? We'll get back after the prayer meeting and see how it all went. But we have great confidence in the filled people who have wisdom can figure out the competency packages along the way together. Have you grown interested in becoming a supervisor yet? That's what this week is all about. You'll never lead more than a team. A small cadre of people are very much like yourself. You can know all of their birthdays if you regarded them in such a way that you wanted to attach to them in that way. Very much like yourself, those people you can empathize with. People, parentheses, next semester, you're going to be asking empathy questions. You're going to try to find out, what do they hear where they live and work and experience the community? What do they see? What do they think? What do they do? You're going to have to know the animal in its natural habitat, and it's not anywhere close what you think it is right now. Look, trust me, if you're willing to get in on this. So, a cadre of people very much like yourself. Therefore, make the spiritual mastery of social laws the secret of your leadership charm. Well, dude, give it to us. What's a social law? You know that if I put my hands on this tower here that's behind me, the one that's sizzling up ahead, I endanger myself in ways that would be hard to justify when my friends find me. I think I'm going to be one of those guys that my friends are going to get a chuckle no matter how it goes. Yep, that's Russ. But there's a lot of power coursing through there. And someone, somewhere, at some point decided if we could harness the stuff that comes from lightning bolts, man, we could get a lot of stuff done. That's a lot of juice. By the way, I define power as the capacity to implement your will. The capacity to implement your will. People who can implement their will have power. People who can do a lot with their will have a lot more power. So I just kind of keep it simple that way. But somewhere along the way, they say it's it's Ben Franklin. But harnessing the power of an electric bolt, maybe into a wire and into a key and on a kite, and then developing a technology to cooperate with nature's power is one of these geniuses of the modern age that just hangs in plain sight, is taken for granted, but it makes all the difference in the world as to whether it's dark or light in so many places in the world, and all that provides. All that a Psalm 27 consciousness that someone who wants light doesn't have to be afraid. So, back to the social laws. Well, just like you understand natural laws, that there are things that have always been there for the discovery, for folks to become curious as to how they work. And by becoming theoretically curious about it and doing diagnostics and maybe experimenting and testing things, they come into a refined understanding as how to harness the power of nature. And because their interests flow from within to without, they care about justice and mercy, compassion and love and proclamation and witness. They're the people who care about congruence. They've got priorities, postures, and practices and projects that move forth in the world. Because they're those kinds of people, harnessing power becomes an important thing. Well, these are natural laws. Well, what's a social law? If I were to, what's a good one? In my country, if you saw me, Russ, walking hand to hand with another male for long periods of time, or a long period of time, unbroken, and you had no explanation, it's possible that you could attribute that Russ is attracted to men. And whatever goes along with that for you and with you, and whatever you do with that kind of information, could become a story inside of your own mind that you take into the world. And it will mean whatever it becomes as it chains out far from you. However, if you knew that the man's hand that I was holding was from West Africa, and that in West Africa, friends always, when walking together, especially during goodbyes, take hands and walk and talk, sometimes halfway to the destination, as good hospitality. And that whole swaths of the world's population would look at that scene and say, wow, you don't get to see really close friends much these days. But depending on the perspective you began with would influence your interpretation. And it would be nothing but social laws influencing your interpretation. What a culture has decided the priority is influences the story that gets told and the questions that get asked and the answers that get provided, almost without mention or in an unspoken way. So there are social laws that we sometimes call theories. And what I'm saying in this session as we get started here is, and say that your team is your teacher, that there are practices around the development of people, around mediating influence through people, communication, clarity, connection, achieving purposes together, that a team is sufficient to self-organize, as one theorist would say. What I supply inside of our course space will be more extension of the substitutes discussion, with a kind of an exploration of some things you might want to consider as it pertains to being supervisors and mastering the social laws for spiritual purposes and from spiritual motives. So your question for this week is this: what are the social laws that you must be mastering based on what you have been learning from your team?